On to our next bill. Chair Henchman has House File 81 up next, off-highway vehicles. Chair Henchman, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the motion is that House File 81 be recommended to be placed on the general register.
Thank you, Chairman Henchman. Would you like to explain your bill?
Sure, I will do that. Members, since the passage of Minnesota's PFAS ban, which was pretty expansive in 2023, the impact has been, I think, more than what a lot of folks might have anticipated, certainly those that are attempting to purchase some products and in some cases fix products, access services, and what my bill seeks to address is what it, I think it is a prime example of that. House File 81 would exempt off-highway vehicles, otherwise known as OHVs. So that'd be snowmobiles, e-bikes, from the definition of a juvenile product. There's more there, but generally that's what we're focusing on. My hope is that the bill could positively impact other similarly affected families as my own, and e-bikes might be a pretty good example of one of the challenges that folks are having, thinking, you know, this is something that continue to be available, and there's some real challenges there. So that is, in a nutshell, what the bill is doing, but I know there's going to be a lot of questions here today. I have testifiers, I'm sure, that are going to be wanting to weigh in on the bill as well, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Chair Henchman, for that explanation. I think we'll go right to testifiers, remembering, as we discussed at the start, we've got 2 minutes per testifier. So first up is Chris Conroy from ATV Association of Minnesota. Oh, yeah, we'll do on deck is Karen Umphris, Amateur Riders Motorcycle Association. Be ready. All right, Mr. Conroy, to your testimony. Announce yourself. Yeah, thank you. Identify yourself for the committee and proceed.
All right. My name is Chris Conroy. I am with ATV Minnesota. I am the chairperson of the Youth Safety Committee. I'm a certified Minnesota DNR Youth ATV Safety Instructor and also a trail ambassador. As an outdoor user group, we'd like to thank those working to reduce forever chemicals. However, we also realize there's well-intentioned legislation that can sometimes lead to unintentional consequences. The passage of the PFAS forever chemicals law has resulted in the ban of youth ATVs in Minnesota. The unintended consequences is safety. That's the reason I'm here today. Youth ATVs, which are low-powered, lightweight machines, are excellent tools to teaching riders under 12 to ride responsibly. Proper supervision, safety gear, getting an ATV safety certificate, and riding an appropriately sized machine using Minnesota DNR fit requirements are crucial for ATV safety. In 2022, the American Academy of Pediatrics noted 90% of children under 16 involved in ATV crashes were riding adult ATVs. Banning youth ATVs will push novices and first-time users onto high-powered, heavy adult ATVs, creating an unsafe situation. And assuming all kids wait until they're 16 to ride an appropriate adult-sized machine is incorrect. As a youth ATV safety instructor, I can tell you, as I speak to kids in the classes that I teach, I can tell you most of those kids have ridden adult-sized machines already. We need to give kids the opportunity to learn how to ride and operate ATVs and learn how to navigate terrain on an appropriately sized machine. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Conroy. Next up, Karen Umphris. Identify yourself for the committee and proceed.
Hi, I'm Karen Umphris. Thanks for having me here. I am with the Amateur Riders Motorcyclists Association. We're also District 23 of the National American Motorcyclist Association. I am also testifying for Bill HF81. Again, I am a dirt bike school coach. I've been one for 15 years, and we are also very concerned about the safety. We do not feel that PFAs are good for the environment. We do not feel that this should be a permanent exemption, but we need the time to allow the manufacturers to find out ways in which they can update their machines so that they are environmentally correct without PFAs. But PFAs are also in many things that we weren't expecting, like gas tanks. So right now, if we don't have the PFAs in the plastic gas tanks, it will actually leak gas, which is not good. So we need that time. We're also very concerned about the safety, as Chris said, about putting kids on youth-size machines instead of adult-size machines. It's very detrimental to the kids for their safety to have them be on adult-sized machines. We also saw a ban in 2008 on youth-sized machines, and three things happened, or one of two things happened. Either the kids were not recreating with their family, experiencing the outdoors, or they were put on adult-sized machines. In this case, we also have the risk that we're sending all of our people over to Wisconsin or Iowa or to other places to buy the youth-sized machines and bringing them into Minnesota, which won't help the PFA's situation in Minnesota either. So we very much appreciate your time, and we hope that 81 passes. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Christian Franson from MinUSA. Identify yourself for the committee and proceed with your testimony.
Chair, members of the committee, my name is Christian Franson, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Minnesota United Snowmobilers Association, or more commonly referred to as MinUSA. In Minnesota, we have near 22,000 miles of groomed trails and clubs across the state to facilitate this great sport. Despite our lack of snow, we still have youth clubs meeting. That said, youth safety and participation are two of our organization's top priorities. Consistent with the MPCA report, I spoke with one manufacturer who confirmed that the PFAS-containing components of these machines are internally contained and not readily accessible by the average rider, particularly those of young age. For these reasons and others, we support the passage of House File 81. I'd like to thank the chair as well as the committee, and particularly the author of the bill, for focusing on these fun outdoor activities across the state. Thank you. Stand
All
for
right.
any questions.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Ivana Stark, and then Kirk Kadelko will be up after that. Please identify yourself for the committee and proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Ivana Stark, State Director of Clean Water Action Minnesota. Our mission is to ensure that all water is fishable, swimmable, and drinkable for generations to come. Thank you for your time today. First, I want to say that Amara's law doesn't ban ATVs, but it does ban the use of PFAS in them. That's an important distinction to make. A few months ago, I was interviewed by Fox 9 about PFAS and ATVs because the general manager of a small motorsports business had reached out to them. After the interview, I emailed this gentleman, and we both met with the senator to talk about the situation. He shared two emails with me, one from Honda dated December 20th, 2024, and the other from Yamaha dated January 3, 2025, just 2 days after the law took effect. These emails acknowledged the new PFAS regulations, but by then it was too late for the retailers to adjust their inventory. These manufacturers were aware of Amara's law by mid-2023, yet they allowed businesses to purchase inventory they knew that they would not be legal to sell. This tactic unfairly placed the burden on small businesses, using them as leverage to argue that implementation is too difficult and too costly. Minnesota businesses should not be blindsided. This is not a failure of the law, but of industry's refusal to prepare. To give a blanket exemption because multi-million-dollar industries couldn't do their job and notify retailers is ridiculous. Trade associations, the chamber, and manufacturers knew this was happening and did nothing to prepare or swap out the PFAS components. The party at fault here isn't the law. It isn't the time or the team it took to put it together. The party at fault is corporations and their insatiable greed. This isn't about ATVs. This is about gutting the most comprehensive ban on toxic PFAS in the country. And the chemical industry knows this. States across the country are following Minnesota's lead to protect the water from PFAS. And again, this isn't about ATVs. This is just a way to get the law and bust it wide open and strip it for parts. We can do better than this, and we must be better than this, and so I ask that you reject House File 81 to protect Minnesotans. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Clerk Kudelka, please identify yourself. for the
Mr.
committee and
Chair.
Proceed.
While we're moving up, could the testifier mic be pulled closer to that one in particular? It's a little bit hard to
Sure.
hear.
Yeah, please speak into the microphone. All right, identify yourself for committee and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Kirk Kudelka. I'm Assistant Commissioner with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Just want to talk a little bit about the bill, the statute itself. While some view these prohibitions through the lens of protecting folks from direct touch or exposures to these harmful chemicals, our concerns cover additional exposure pathways, and it's important to keep this in mind as we look at this and other legislation that will be before us. One, there is the production phase of the products. They create and release PFAS into the environment, creating exposures to neighbors and workers and the larger natural resources. There's the exposure from the direct touch that most folks are talking about in their letters, but there's also the disposal at the end of life. The disposal of these products introduce these chemicals to our wastewater facilities and our landfills where they pose significant challenges. And I think it's important to keep this concept in mind as we talk about this in the next bill. In implementing Amara's law, the MPCA has engaged over 1,000 manufacturers, retailers, industrial groups since the passage in May 23. We're committed to continue having these conversations with businesses and others on how do we protect folks from PFAS. In our recent report that we testified here, we recommended an extension until 2032 for the use of intentionally added PFAS on electronic and internal components. This exemption allows folks time to develop safer alternatives in these areas. Specifically to the outdoor recreational vehicle area, we've heard from one manufacturer that our recommendations would address the issue for these products. In addition, we've reached out to others to determine if it would also address the issue. To date, we have not heard that this would cause any problems, the agency's recommendation. The problem is this bill goes beyond just the extension of electronic and internal components, allowing PFAS uses in other areas of the devices. In addition, it would allow manufacturers to introduce PFAS to new items moving forward, thus going in the wrong direction instead of going away from reducing PFAS usage. It is why we oppose the bill and recommend implementation of the MPCA's proposed changes for electronic and other internal components instead. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, Lori Olinger. Please identify yourself for the committee and proceed.
Hi, my name is Lori Olinger, and I'm here on behalf of Sierra Club North Star chapter. And I'm speaking in opposition to HF81, which would carve out exemptions for snowmobiles, e-bikes, and off-highway vehicles used by kids. Some in the industry claim that fluoropolymers are safer than PFAS and are essential in motorized vehicles. However, a variety of other PFAS are emitted during the production, processing, use, and end-of-life treatment of fluoropolymers. There are serious concerns regarding the toxicity and adverse effects of fluorinated processing aids on humans and the environment, including certain types of cancer, immunotoxicity, reproductive, developmental, and liver toxicity, and thyroid disease. There are concerns regarding the safe disposal of fluoropolymers also, which are extremely persistent in the environment. Landfilling of fluoropolymers leads to contamination of leachates with PFAS, and the effectiveness of incineration to destroy PFAS and the tendency for formation of fluorinated or other byproducts is not well understood. Given fluoropolymers' extreme persistence, emissions associated with their production, use, and disposal, and high likelihood for human exposure to PFAS, their production and uses should be curtailed, except in cases of essential use, and Amara's law provides for that. So I ask you to vote against HF81 and not weaken Amara's law.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. And finally, on my list, I have Kyle Makarios. Please identify yourself for the committee and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kyle Makarios, and I'm here on behalf of the Motorcycle Industry Council, the Specialty Vehicle Institute of America, and the Recreational Off-Highway Vehicle Association. We represent hundreds of manufacturers, dealers, and distributors of motorcycles, ATVs, and ROVs, which are frequently referred to as side-by-sides. We strongly support House File 81 to exclude youth off-highway vehicles from Minnesota's PFAS law. Lower-risk polymerized PFAS are currently unavoidable uses in power sports in order to withstand extreme heat and chemical blends, to provide water resistance, corrosion resistance, and friction properties, for electrical insulation to provide flexibility and durability, in fuel hoses, which must withstand a myriad of fuel blends while maintaining flexibility and structural integrity to prevent cracking or catastrophic leaks, and for gaskets, which must stand up to high heat to prevent fluids and fuel vapors from exiting the vehicle, causing clean air violations, environmental contamination, and risk of vehicle fires. Youth OHVs are properly sized and powered specifically for youth. By banning them, you could force children to use adult-sized and powered vehicles, putting children at risk. Several years ago, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission was looking to ban lead in youth products, but they ultimately excluded youth OHVs from the ban because they recognized the risk of putting children on adult-sized vehicles. Minnesota law already excludes youth products such as phones, computers, gaming consoles, and other items that children are in constant contact with. Unlike those excluded items, children are not coming into regular physical contact with our vehicle's gaskets, hoses, wiring insulation, or chrome plating. We've seen news reports across Minnesota of the economic harm already inflicted upon power sports dealers who have youth products at their dealerships that they are now unable to sell due to this overly broad law. We hope that this committee takes action to correct that today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Is there any further testimony or testifiers in the audience? If not, we'll proceed to member questions. Do we have any questions? Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions for the MPCA. Maybe Assistant Commissioner Kudelka could come back.
Go ahead, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Chair Burkle. To Assistant Commissioner Kudelka, in your testimony, you mentioned how this would open the door for additional products to House File 81 as it's currently before us, could allow for additional uses of PFAS. Could you say a little bit more about that and what those would be?
Commissioner Kudelka.
Sure. Chair and committee members, for the record, again, my name is Kirk Adelka with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Because it exempts the entire class, it would still allow for PFAS in those other external areas. For instance, we have heard folks talk about it being potentially used in reflective material or that. If it is already not being used there, this would allow for it to be reintroduced in that area moving forward, or new uses of PFAS between now and 2032. So that's where our concern lies, is that there are still those potential issues here where those external pieces, which folks have said are the most concern to them, those would be exempted.
Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Chair Burkle, and thank you, Assistant Commissioner. I guess I have another question then as well. I know you also oversee landfill policy for MPCA. What happens when somebody throws out a product that has PFAS into it and it's either and it goes into a landfill, for example? What is that process like? How do products, do they have an effect when they're in the landfill? Do they not? How does it work to have a product with PFAS in it in one of our Minnesota landfills?
Commissioner Kudelka.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. When those things are disposed in landfills, they break down. And that includes then PFAS, which can be released into the leachate, which then is sent to wastewater treatment plants. So both our public and private landfills now have to deal with this cost. Same with our wastewater treatment plants that are there. What we're seeing in leachate, even studies are showing up to 10,000 parts per trillion in the leachate. So there's a lot of PFAS in there that are now being pushed off to our many times publicly owned landfills and taxpayers or wastewater plants to cover the costs.
Representative Jordan.
Yep, and I'll wrap up. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Assistant Commissioner Kudelka. It's a mouthful. Yeah, I think this is not a good bill. I will be voting no on it. I think, this isn't something that just impacts people who buy an ATV or buy a new bike or something. This impacts all of us. We all drink water. We're all downstream from somewhere. This is something that's going to increase PFAS when we work so hard to make sure that we would shut off that tap. We know we have a problem with PFAS. I'm not on the bonding committee, but I know some people are, and I don't know how many millions and billions of dollars bonding committee members have had to hear from communities that want to deal with their PFAS, but turning on this tap again is not a good idea for Minnesota, and it doesn't make financial sense for us as a legislature, so I'll be voting no. Thanks.
Any other questions from members? Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Chair Burkle. I'm not sure if this is a question for the MPCA or for Mr. Makarios, but I'm wondering about alternatives to PFAS. We had a presentation by the MPCA talking about pens and some other products, and so I'm just wondering what else is out there, and I'm not sure who can best answer that question.
Would Mr. Makarios or Assistant Commissioner Kudelka, either one, or maybe
Maybe
both?
both.
Maybe both.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please identify yourself. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Purcell, we do not believe that there are currently alternatives, PFAS-free alternatives for things like fuel gaskets, fuel hoses, gaskets, and engines. That is why for the vast majority of the uses that the ban on this is pushed out till 2032, right? But the one exception is for youth vehicles. So we're trying to craft a narrowly carved expansion to recognize that the fuel gasket in a youth ATV is no different than the fuel gasket in an adult ATV, and we think should be treated similarly.
Okay. Assistant Commissioner Kudelka.
Mr. Chair and committee members, again, for the record, Kirk Kudelka, I'm Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. There are some items, as mentioned, some gaskets and electronics and that we don't see alternatives yet ready, but they're in the near future. And so that's why the report that the MPCA put together is about internal and electronic components and really focusing on those that are the issue and not a blanket exemption for the whole product category of outdoor vehicles.
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Chair Burkle. I'm sorry, can you repeat that last part? I'm not sure I totally understood that.
Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and committee members, it's because of those internal components. We really want to focus any additional time extensions on those components versus the whole vehicle, because really just focusing on the electronics, the gaskets and that, where we don't have an alternative today, but will in the future.
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Chair Burkle. I guess one follow-up then, what's kind of the timeline and what's the pipeline looking at this? I mean, I think you're hearing a lot of concerns from people and in the letters and from members over here of thinking that, this sounds like, oh, we're poking a little hole right now that could turn into a, complete tear. So I guess I'm looking for some assurances of like, how far away are those innovations, if you have insight into that? Thank you,
Chair
Mr. Chair.
Heinzman, looks like you have an answer for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Purcell. I don't think that we're able to tell you conclusively what time a product is going to be available. And I would argue that that's part of the reason that the bill is here today. We hope that it's available sooner than later, but the manufacturers can develop products, and then in addition, there's going to be the testing phase. How long can this product hold fuel safely? Or will it potentially not be able to perform to the level that keeps our kids safe if they happen to be using a product used with an alternative? There's a lot of questions there, and you could argue that that is somewhat of a symptom of passing legislation that may not have the technology behind it to support the desired outcomes. And this bill is attempting to bridge that gap. Rather than put kids further at risk who would, as we've heard in testimony, potentially be jumping on an adult model ATV as opposed to one that's made for them, well, then we're having an entirely different conversation. And I think that we're all struggling with the potential impacts and the health risk of PFAS in products, while at the same time, the safety risk that arguably could be greater than the health impact to these parts being used in youth model ATVs and snowmobiles and such. So to answer your question, there is no perfect answer. Nobody can tell you the date specific where that technology will suddenly be available.
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Chair Burkle. I guess just a couple of follow-ups. I think it's tough to equate, a family and, someone who gets hurt on an ATV versus the, as Commissioner Kudelka said, additional exposure pathways, both in the making of the PFAS, the involvement, of the product itself, and then that lifetime of, it's not called forever chemicals for nothing. And I guess the other alternative narrative that I will just say in response is that I think also we see this sort of legislation like we passed in Amara's law. We know that there's a problem. And just because there isn't a perfect fix doesn't mean that we shouldn't take steps. So I would just argue that perhaps having legislation that's a little more aspirational can also hopefully spur innovation and create incentive for these companies to get on board to achieve what we want, which is no more PFAS. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Representative Fisher. Okay.
Just want to check real quick. Are there any more questions?
Okay, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, on this line of questioning in terms of exposure and thinking about liquid fuel and the need for having PFAS equipment in the lines, in all of the devices relating to that liquid fuel, one of the things, it's not a choice, is if you're by the exhaust. And do we know, if these vehicles are shedding PFAS through those internal combustion engines, that's not a choice if you're near that. That's a different type of exposure, particularly with kids. So, I understand what you're saying, Representative Heinzman, but precautionary principle that if we are concerned about some levels of exposure, we may have exposure that comes in through inhalation from the emissions that are related to that fuel going through those lines. I'm assuming the PFAS is in the lines to retain the integrity of the lines or the equipment, but then it probably is also being shed because of the fuel. Any answer on that?
Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Hansen, I would just say, I think that it is important. I don't think that safety is disconnected from what was passed in 2023 versus what I think these two things are connected in House File 81 in that if you have a alternative fuel line being used in a youth model ATV in an attempt to comply with current language and it's not performing to the same level, I think we all understand that can cause a fire. I have several of these youth model ATVs and dirt bikes, and when it comes to those kinds of internal components, I'm going to buy the highest quality product available to replace those lines, because if I screw that up, and you mentioned an exhaust system, there's heat there, there's the potential for ignition if there's unused fuel. The last thing we want is a kid being burned or harmed due to fuel that potentially could be leaking as a result of the PFAS ban in juvenile products. I would think that in a bipartisan way, we could all look at that together and agree that's bad, and that it is connected to the safety concern that we all share for our kids. And what we're asking for is that if this bill were to become law, the time is available, the opportunity is there for those products to catch up with legislation that was passed. And if that product can be found to be a successful alternative, great. But in the meantime, we don't have one, and we don't have, as we were discussing earlier, as responding to questions, we don't have a date for the timeline that would be certain to know, okay, now we have XYZ component available for use in these products. We're just not there yet.
Representative Hansen. You're done. Any other questions? Otherwise, Representative Fisher, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Chair Burkle. This would be for the MPCA Assistant Commissioner Kudelka. I was a little concerned when you were responding to the questions earlier from Representative Jordan that the way this is written right now, it could allow for additional uses of PFAS in these products that are currently not used. Is that correct?
Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and committee members, correct.
That also raises concerns for me. Is it possible that the way between this bill and other bills that are written, there are end dates right now for the use of PFAS in a number of products. Does that still exist, or do these exemptions start opening that up where there may not be an end date on some of these products?
Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and committee members, we believe the report addresses some of those issues that you've talked about, the report recommendations, where it would still then kick them into the 2032 category. However, in the meantime, though, there are those additional uses that continue or new uses of PFAS through the way the bill is written. That's why we support and can believe we can address the other issues through the report recommendations.
Representative Fisher.
So am I correct, you're saying that, that there will be no product exempted after 2032?
Assistant Commissioner. Go ahead.
Chair,
Yeah.
these products would then kick up to the 2032 prohibition, and they would have to follow that deadline under the way it's written.
So it's extending out the current one. Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I had that understanding. Thank you. At this point in time, I'd like to move to table it and roll call.
Okay, the motion to table is a non-debatable motion. With that, take the roll.
Chair Heinzman,
No.
Vice Chair Burkle,
No.
Lead Fisher,
Yes.
Representative Falconer,
Yes.
Representative Finke, excused. Representative Gilman,
No.
Representative Hanson. Yes. Representative Jacob. Representative Jordan,
Aye.
Representative Nelson.
No.
Representative Purcell,
Purcell, aye.
Representative Schultz.
No.
Representative Warwas.
No.
All right. We have 5 yeses and 7 noes. The motion does not prevail. A roll call requested for the final vote. First off, Chair Heinzman, would you like to wrap up your bill and renew your motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I continue to want to work with members on these bills as they make their way to the House floor. So please reach out to me if there's something that you believe we could potentially address. And I thank members for the discussion this afternoon.
All right, Chair Heinzman, would you like to renew your motion?
I would continue to move that House File 81 be recommended to be placed on the general register.
All right, thank you, Chair Heinzman. And roll call requested. Please take the roll.
Chair Heinzman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burkle,
Yes.
Lead Fisher,
Fisher, no.
Representative Falconer,
Nope.
Representative Finke, excused. Representative Gilman. Yes. Representative Hanson. Representative Jacob. Yes. Representative Jordan.
No.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Purcell.
Purcell, nay.
Representative Schultz.
Schultz, aye.
Representative Warwas.
All right, we have 7 ayes and 5 nays. The motion prevails.